Hello, welcome to this music class. Today I want to talk about notes and the music stave. But as we are going to look at this, I would like to start with first of all what the stave or the staff is. Um, what we normally know about this is that there are normally three lines that we use to indicate, actually not three but five lines that we normally use when we are trying to put in those notes into the music staff, to trying to read. So those lines, they are always five. So those five lines, since they are parallel to each other, the five of them form up what we call a music staff or a stave. And so pitch is indicated by using certain kind of symbols called the notes, placed on a series of five lines called a staff. Now the first example you can see is this one. And as you can see, let me try to enlarge on it a little so that you can see. So we have these five lines: one, two, three, four, five. Now, those five lines normally in between them they have spaces: one, two, three, four. So these four spaces and the five lines is what we call a staff or a stave. Still the same example I was trying to show you can see. And whenever we are numbering them, in case they tell you maybe in the first line or the second stave, so we always start counting the lines from down. One, two, three, four, five. We don't start from up. One, two, no. We start from down, going upwards. So it always has to move in this format. That's how we always move. So now, the five lines of the staff, the four spaces in between the lines, the lower the note. Now, one thing we need to know that as the notes tend to be down here, even their pitch will sound low compared to when it is up. So for example, you can find maybe if you found a note when it is here, it is different from the way it would sound when it is here. So this would be like maybe do, do. So that kind of thing is what we are looking at. So those are pitches. So the higher you go is the more stronger or louder or sharp the note becomes as you go down. As you go up, I mean, when you go down, the deeper the notes become. Mm. Um, Perhaps having said that, the higher the note is physical representation of the staff, the higher the pitch of the note. That's what I was trying to say. Now, the lower the note is physical representation of the staff, the lower the pitch of the note. Now, a small emphasis about this is that let's just look at it maybe in the terms of maybe the pianoforte. Now, when you look at the music in this format, mm, most of the pieces you will always find it has something like a bracket here. It has something like a bracket this. So this kind of bracket is what we use for joining this and these two staves. Now the moment you find two staves combined like this, in most cases we tend to refer to them as piano forte. Now that is the combination that we tend to use. We call that bracket as a brace used. Now the right hand part is written on the upper stave and the left hand part is written on the lower stave. This writing is mostly in relation to the keyboard. Mm. When you look at the keyboard now, this one it represents your right hand, and this one tends to represent your left hand in the keyboard when you're playing the piano or the keyboard or any other musical instrument which needs two hands. Whatever name you call it, either piano or a keyboard. So that's one thing I need to talk about this. Um, Having said that, perhaps we can look at also the clefs. Now, a clef normally is a sign placed at the beginning of each stave. They show the names and pitch of the notes. There are three kinds of clefs. Mm. Now, at the beginning of the music, when you look at this line, always in this point, always at this point, at the very beginning point here, normally there's what we call a stave. Mm. What a clef. Now, a clef is what we use for representing music at this point here. Sorry for that. So the first clef that we need that we have to look at is the treble clef or the G clef. Now, this is a symbol placed at the beginning of the music note. It represents the highest pitched voice. The highest pitched voice is soprano. Just imagine someone singing those high notes and you're like, wow, what a blessing or what. So that is high pitched voice. Um, it represents the highest pitched voice. That's what I said. Another name for the treble clef is called a G clef. Now, why it is called a G clef is because around this area here, hmm, as we go down at a later time, you will realize that normally the note G, hmm, is normally found here. The G clef is found around this area. There is a line, the line of G in the stave is always found coiled here. So that's why we normally we call it the G clef because of that. Okay. Um, the other one is the bass clef. Now another reason that's why we tend to use where we apply this treble clef is normally when we are looking at the other notes of not the other notes but the other wind instruments, mostly like wind instruments or those high note instruments. We tend to use this. An example of such a scenario is normally the musical formats. For example, when you look at a flute, a recorder, a violin, okay? Those are some of the few examples of instruments that we tend to use this. They are mostly found on the orchestras. So we use this symbol of the treble clef or the G clef. The other one is called the bass clef or the F clef. Now, whereas this clef is much more attributed to the male voice, there are also other instruments that use it. Now, this clef is used to indicate the deep, low voice in the stave. So this is how it looks at. It looks like, and why we call it an F clef is because when you look at the, according to the stave, in any the line that will be passing in between it here, that line is normally called the F. In between these two dots, we call it as the line of F in music. So that line is why as to why we it is attributed to be called what the F clef. Hmm. Now, perhaps the last one. Okay, some of the instruments that we use this. An example of such an instrument is a cello. We also use double bass. We use those heavy instruments, say maybe even a trombone. Those ones that look heavy, and when you feel like someone is singing, you're wondering, whoa, that kind of thing. So we tend to use this instrument, that clef in the music. Then perhaps the last one, which is used, and that is the C clef. Now, the C clef is one musical symbol that is rarely used in voices. However, this use was much more common at a certain era, though even up to date, there are some composers who still use it. Currently, it is least used in musical notation, but if used, it may be common in classical music or orchestration. That's why they can be common. And sometimes we tend to use it to represent certain instruments. For example, an instrument of the treble of what of the alto voice, an instrument of the soprano of the tenor voice, and even at some point even instruments of the soprano voice. That is less least used. Now, um, it may be common in classical or that's how I will say. This clef has a movable C. Its middle C always its middle C always is a movable one. As the middle C moves from one stave line to another, it takes on different voices, and this is how it looks like. In most cases, this is how it looks like. So the area as which we know as the movable C is this point. Mm. So, assuming this was the musical instrument and it was placed around this area, assuming now this area, mm, assuming this area was placed was placed around here, hmm, in this line, that would become what we call as the bass. It would not bass, but this is more of the tenor, whereas the alto would appear in this line. That's where that coiling would come from. Whereas the soprano, if they were to indicate the soprano voice, you would find it here. But we shall not be dwelling on that as per now, but you'll discover it when time goes by. However, our major issue is about this. Now, in pianoforte, the treble clef and or the G clef is used on the upper stave, and then the bass or the F clef on the lower stave. Now, the C clef is used in music for some orchestral instruments and sometimes for alto and tenor voices. That's where they can be commonly used, more especially in the instrumental area than the voices. The stave with the treble clef is called the treble stave, whereas a stave with the bass clef is called a bass clef, a bass stave. Now, what I'm trying to mean is, assuming there was this stave, the whole of this stave did not have this symbol, it would just be there as a stave. But the moment we introduce this treble clef, already now this whole stave would be known as it would be called as the treble stave. Whereas if you introduce this symbol in it onto the stave, it will become now the bass stave. That's what we are trying to mean. Perhaps dwelling more about the pianoforte is that the pianoforte we should not only consider only like maybe to should only have the bass stave and the and the tenor stave, the soprano stave. What we may use is sometimes to may even have on the treble clefs. For example, you have like around 5 staves and you only having only each stave is only having a treble stave. Still, it qualifies to be a pianoforte because pianoforte, what we are looking at is just the joining of the re, the joining of those staves into one. So, having said that about the clefs, I believe this is where we need to end, and then perhaps we can learn more at a later time. In case you have any question, feel free to inbox me and I'll respond to you. Hello, welcome to this new episode. Today, I would like to talk about music notations and then its names. In the previous lesson, we saw something pertaining the music notes, not the music notes, but the stave, the staff, and the clefs. Those symbols that are placed at the beginning, we know that a stave has 5 lines, and besides 5 lines, also it also has the 4 spaces. And perhaps now this is the time that we need to know how to name those staves basing on the pianoforte that we looked at. Maybe now what we can talk about as the treble stave and then the bass stave or the grand stave. Now, just as we looked at the pianoforte element, is the same thing that we are going to look at in the grand stave. Now, perhaps now this is the best time we need to talk about the grand stave. The grand stave in most cases is where now we have those two elements together. So stave lines and the spaces are represented using the alphabetical letters, and there are only 7 alphabetical letters that we use. These letters tend to repeat itself after the last letter is reached. They include A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Those are 7 letters. It is these alphabetical letters that we use to name the notes and pitches in Western music. So, how does it appear in the ground stave? From our stave below, perhaps let me just give in a small hint on what I was saying about the letters repeating. Say, if you started from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, after G, again the next step becomes A onwards. That is what I was meaning by then. That it's repetition. So it will start again after A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, onwards, onwards. It can go as high as from maybe this part going onwards like that, but for as long as you're naming it A, B, C, D, E, F, G, to almost an imaginary line that we may not look at the moment. Okay, so let's look at our step below. We can see that there is a point where both the treble clef and the bass clef share the same note. That is what we call it's actually the C above the bass clef, and this happens to be the same C below the treble clef. So the C above the bass clef. Now this is our bass clef, and the C above it is this one. Okay, and then this is our treble clef. It is up, and below it is this C we are looking at. So that's the C we are looking at. So this is the C, and this C is what we normally call as the middle C. Hmm? No matter where you're playing, whether you're playing with your left hand, this, when you reach this C, it is the same sound that if you're playing with your right hand, the treble clef, and you came to this C, they will always sound the same. So that's why we call it that format. Uh, Perhaps as we continue, so in this format, remember that we say that this symbol happens to be the F clef, and why we say that it is the F clef is because where the two dots are, this dot and this one, in between it there is a line. Now this is the line we're meaning to be called the F line. I remember that I spoke about it in the previous video. And then also here we say that there is a point where this element coils, and now the point where this element coils, there is this line, the second line from down. So that second line is what we normally call it as the line of G. And if you see, even it is here as what? G. Whereas this, we say that it is the F clef. And if you follow this line systematically, you will find that this is the F line. So this one, the G line, this is the F line. I need us to mark this. In the treble clef, there are two things that you need to consider the most important when you want to name these lines much more better. You will have all the namings, all the spaces, all the what. But one thing that we need to know is that these lines, for as long as you've drawn this treble clef, mark the most important, the two most important area, and that is G and then the middle C. For as long as you know this, you will be in position to name the rest of the lines and spaces. Because now if you have G, you know G is the last element, so which means you will have now A, B, C, D, E, F, onwards like that. So even here, since this is G, and when you know that alphabetically the letter before G is F, so which means you will have here your F in there, right? The letter before F is E, so this is your E. Okay. The letter before E is D, so your D will be the space here, and then the letter before D is a C, and this is your C. So you can be in position to say, okay, C. You can be in position to say that, okay, this is now C, D, E, F, G, A, because now you have to repeat again. You repeat after the last letter A, B, C, D, E, F, and it continues onwards. So that is one way we need to name that. So you need to know only the line of G and the middle C. The rest you can be in position to fix. The same applies to the bass clef, and we know it as the F clef. So since it is the F clef, this is F. So you need to know your F, and you need to know your middle C. And the middle C happens to be the C above. So Since it is a C above, that means when you are naming it, mm, uh, when you are naming it, you will realize that you still need to have A, B, C, D, E, F, G with you. For as long as you have that, just try to arrange those letters and then see if I'm to go in a reverse order, which letter will come before the other one, which one will be coming after the other. In that kind of format is how we shall have to move. So this is one basic that we tend to use when trying to name. So in the bass clef, have the F line with you. In the treble clef, have the G line with you, and then try to arrange your alphabetical letters going up, going down. But we shall see other ways that we can try to use to cram this in case things are not easy on your side. Comparing the images, comparing the image above with the one below in the letter, the middle C is the red dotted circle. Having a keyboard on the extreme left, so there is no magic about that. All the above have the same pitches. Okay. So when I was talking about it, that this is the middle C, at this point, the pitch is the same. When you try to move up, the pitches will be changing. When you try to move down, the pitch will continue changing. But here, the note will be the same. So it may be do ti la so fa mi re do ti la so onwards. So or I can have do re mi fa sol la ti do re mi. So it keeps on going like that. So the lower the downer you move, it's kind of moving like in a ladder. Just imagine when you're moving in a ladder, in the ladder format. So uh, let me try to see if I can draw it. Okay, it has refused in that area. I don't know where best I can again draw it. So just imagine you're in a steps. Ta 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 ta. So just imagine you're moving in that kind of format. Okay. So that is what we would be looking at in that kind of format. So the lower you go is the more heavy it becomes. The voice becomes. Just imagine you're watching a horror movie. Just imagine those deep sounds. So that is what would happen. Now, here in the next image I want to show us is that from the above illustration we can use that there are various ways of grasping the concepts of knowing the names of both the stave lines and the stave spaces by use of an acronym or an abbreviation. So the two elements may sound the same, may not sound the same, but we try to bring out how best can we help people to grasp these namings of some of these things. Now, you can imagine, assuming this how big the space is. This space, no matter how wide it may be, this is space. mm, No matter how wide it may be, yeah, can even be as wide as even a meter apart, no problem. But always the middle C is the same. That spacing is just to be there, reluctant. Now, remember what I told you? This is your G, this is your C. Hmm? Your C is hidden somewhere because we would have placed it here and not in the space, but it would be having a line here, and then this is your F. So that's how we would name them. So if you know that this is F, a letter before F is E, before E is B, C, in that kind of format moving downwards. So that is how we know. As per now, I don't want to tackle the ledger lines for a short time, but let's first of all concentrate on these two elements of naming the lines and the spaces using the acronyms that we may have. So let's start with the treble clef. The four spaces can be abbreviated by using the word face. Face as the word face itself, okay? As the word face, as you would see. F-A-C-E. That's how we would name um, That's how we would name actually the spaces, the four spaces. Remember it. Remember in the above issue we spoke about there are only four spaces. One, two, three, four. So the same applies here. And I told you the naming of the lines normally we start from down going upwards, not from up going down. So in the first space, that is now the space above the first line. Here is where we have our F. In the second space, that is the one above G, we have A. The other one is C, and the other one is E. So that is what we use. We use that abbreviation first. Mm. Uh, when it comes to the lines, there are 5 lines. So here we have used the E, G, B, D, and the F. And we would use an acronym as every good boy does fine. That is for naming. The treble clef, mm, the other acronym we normally use is now when it comes to the bass clef, whereby also the first space, that's now the space below it, we use letters A, C, E, and G, whereby this letter will be standing for every cow eats grass. That's one way we use for abbreviating it or grasping how to name that. Whereas for the lines are 5 and these are 5 letters. We use G, B, D, F, A, and sometimes we use the word that we use a sentence to define it, and the sentence is that good boys do fine always. That is what we use for abbreviating that. So we can pause here for a moment and then try to find out if you can figure out how best you can name them. Perhaps you can start with first of all the treble clef, and then from there you can look at the bass clef. But always remember one thing: when you're looking at the treble clef, you should know where G is, because remember we said the treble clef sometimes is called the G clef. So you need to know where your G is, and then you can be and the lower C. If you can have that, that actually we call it the middle C. If you can have that, and then try to name them. Note, when we are naming these treble clefs, don't say there is normally a challenge we face that people may tend to say, okay, they say when we are naming, this is going to be maybe okay. We may say, okay, this is a G, so if it is a G, this is A. No, we don't name the lines separate alone. When you are naming, you're supposed to name both the lines and the space. So if this is your G, then your A must be a space. Your B will be the next line above. Your C will be a space. The next one will be a line. So let the letters follow the line and space. Don't say I'm starting with the space first and then I come to the line and then later on. No. You will confuse yourself and you will be contradicting with what we have in music format in relation to the naming of the lines, and also at some point it will affect you when assuming you were to play the keyboard. So that is what happens. Okay, so having said that, I would love us to end here for this video and for this class, and try as much as possible to at least have a free time, get a paper, try drawing those lines, and try naming them and see if you can recall. So by this kind of practice, you will always be in position to do that. However, um, I will soon be introducing some exercise that we shall be doing, and in that exercise, it's what we shall use for. I will be sending you, and then from there we can see what we can do with it. I would like to end here and say thank you and have the best of your time.